Hello and welcome to the Steel Sports Show, the youth sports podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Martin Brown. Delighted to be joined, as always, by my co-host, Nathan Klinkerbeard. Nathan, great to see you. How are you?
Doing well, Martin. Doing well. Spent a lot of time at the softball fields over the weekend. We finally had our first tournament. Our girls, my daughter, 10U team. So we got 6 games in over the weekend, which was nice. The weather was looking a little sketchy, but it was pretty warm, which was nice. We got to play 2 games Friday, 2 Saturday, 2 Sunday. So yeah, it's finally just good to get out there, get the girls on the field, and get some games under their
Yeah,
belt. So
I
it was a
was.
blast. We had a blast.
That's awesome. I was at my oldest daughter. She's 16. She had her first varsity game for this year. She's a sophomore for softball. It was a bit of. She had 2 games. She had one game Friday, one game Monday, and they couldn't have been any more opposed. They won 18-3 on Friday, and she was as high as a kite. She went 3 for 5, and then they got beat 17-2 on Monday. Completely the opposite, but she still went 2 for 3. So she was in the middle, but she's definitely high or low depending on the what happens in those games. But it's good. I got out there and watched the game Friday. It was fun. It was fun to actually get outside after the winter that we've had. So.
Yeah, I mean we're a new travel team. This is the first season that our girls are doing travel, and it's funny. Some of the parents they're talking. They're like, "Oh, I hope they don't start off and with some losses, and we don't want to get them down." And I'm of course I'm spitting my Steel Sports knowledge and saying the girls don't so much care about wins and losses, right? It's about being out there and having fun and being with their friends and sure enough, yeah, they went 3-3 on the weekend, and even on the losses, the girls had smiles on their faces. I mean, they were just happy to be out there and to be playing and to working on skills and just trying to figure out what they need to work on to improve and moving forward in the season. So I was I was wearing my Steel Sports hat a little bit during the weekend when I was
That
talking to
FPC
parents.
training coming in right there. I see
Exactly.
that. So yeah, that's great. I was out. So Thursday, I was out. My two sons had their first soccer practice. They're 4 and 5, and they're on the same team. And one of them played last year. My 5-year-old, so he's kind of way ahead. I'm still getting my younger one to kind of stop rolling around the grass and get stand up and actually kick the ball a little bit. But my older one's a little bit ahead, so I'm hoping that he definitely loves it. My older one definitely loves it. I'm not sure my younger one's gonna take to it yet, but he's still young, so we'll see. Hopefully. We'll see. But we'll start it off with our baseball talk with our resident expert, Nathan, brought to you by 431sports.com. So what's been happening in the baseball world, Nathan?
Well, the big talk in the baseball world are these torpedo bats, and it's the new rage going throughout Major League Baseball. But the Yankees were the first ones to use them over the weekend, hit 15 home runs, and everyone started noticing there's something different about these bats, and what it is. The bats they've moved more of the wood toward the label, and scientifically they were looking at the analytics and where the players are actually hitting the baseball. And so what they've done is shifted the wood toward the label, and you have a fatter part of the bat, and then it sort of tapers off as you get toward the end of the bat. And the bats are completely legal, and the rules in Major League Baseball, they don't really give a ton of rules or specs on baseball bats. But what they have to be when you're looking at the diameter, they have to be 6.6 centimeters in diameter. That's the max diameter that they can have. So 2.61 inches. So these bats conform to the standards set by Major League Baseball. The only other spec is that they max can only be 42 inches in length. So there's a lot of talk about this, and look, there's only been we're only a week into the season, right? And certainly when you see the Yankees just hitting home runs left and right, the one game they had, the first 3 pitches were home runs. Definitely interesting, and you have some other players and other teams taking notice for sure.
Yeah, I wonder if over a longer period of time, if they analyze it, if it does come down to the bats, will this be something that is embraced by every other player and club, or will it be Major League Baseball coming down and saying, no, we're actually going to have more specifications on the bats and what we're going to do. That's going to be an interesting story. You know, was this a one-time fluke? It'll be interesting to see over a 2-3 month period of if the Yankees are miles ahead in terms of home runs and everyone's using these bats, then you've got to think that there's something to it. And what will happen? It'll be interesting. What do you think?
I mean, it's definitely a small sample size, so I think we need to see how it goes for just a little bit more of a length of the period, so we can actually get some data on it. But I don't know. It seems there's mixed opinions. I think some people, I was reading some articles, some front office staff believe that MLB may come down on it eventually and write some more rules as far as conformity with the bats. I don't know. I like innovation, right? I mean, we have
how long do you think before we see these bats in the hands of the youth kids on these travel tournaments over at the sort of Legacy Park and elsewhere, trying to hit home runs? That'll be the next thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think Victus was one of the groups that made a bat. I think for Anthony Volpe. Louisville Slugger just made one, I think for Ellie De La Cruz, if I'm not mistaken. But De La Cruz used one last night, and I think wound up 7 RBIs, had 2 home runs, a double. He was hitting the ball all over the place on a cold night in Cincinnati when the ball's not supposed to travel as far, when it's 40 to 45 degrees. So I don't know.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting because if you look at equipment across sports, right, there's always an evolution of equipment, whether that's spikes in track, whether that's, cleats in soccer, equipment in American football and the NFL, gloves and things like that to have better control. To always try and get that little bit of advantage. But the bat is something, and obviously we've seen some safety equipment evolve over time in baseball, with the guards and the certain things. But the bat is one thing that has just not changed in 100 years or whatever it is. So to see it now changing, it is going to definitely be interesting to see where this goes. And then does that lead to any other future, quicker evolution of any other things? We talk about baseballs eventually, as well. So it'll be gloves, etc. I mean, there's been this hasn't changed for many years.
And bats. The other big thing with bats was the type of wood that was used. You had a lot of players before using ash, and now if it's maple or birch, so the type of wood has changed over the years and what players have preferred and what they feel has performed better. But like you said, I mean, the bat really hasn't changed that much, and in terms of what it looks like and how much wood is being placed where. But there's always been these ebbs and flows between pitching and offense, and you've had these eras where the pitchers dominated, and then they maybe lowered the mound and moved it back a little further, so then offense had a better chance, and then you kind of saw pitching. I mean, look, pitchers are throwing harder. There's more spin rate. The pitchers have sort of dominated here in recent years, and especially with bullpens and specialists. And I don't know, maybe we'll get more of a shift back toward the offense. Yeah.
It'd be great to see. Look, from a fan perspective, they want to see, home runs, they want to see scoring. And I think to be credit Major League Baseball, they have in the last few years obviously shifted to more of a fan experience, not as far as kind of the banana ball has gone with the fan experience, but they've kind of gone along that journey way behind that, with the speed of play, challenges, things like that. And hey, if we can see more home runs, then why not, from a fan experience? So
yeah. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah, so that was our baseball segment brought to you by 431sports.com. We're going to switch gears to our soccer portion, brought to you by soccer.com. And we're going to introduce our guest. We've got a really great guest on the show today. We're going to talk a little bit about parent behavior in youth sports a little bit later. I'm going to plug my article that I wrote that we'll be sending out shortly. But we are delighted to be joined by Dakota Carroll. Dakota is the teams director for our club in Pennsylvania, Steel United Pennsylvania, and she's also the proud head coach, the 2007 and 08 girls teams in Pennsylvania for Steel United. So Dakota, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, guys. Thanks so much for having me. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Yes, it's spring is upon us. It's I know you're heavy into tryout season over there in Pennsylvania on the East Coast. It's tryout season, I think, across the board in youth soccer. So it must be a busy time for you.
Yes, extremely busy. I am like super grateful though for our coaches and the full-time staff we have, because it is a lot to manage. So appreciate them.
Yeah, Dakota has nearly 500 players in a club in Pennsylvania, so it's one of Steel United's largest clubs. So we're glad. Thank you for giving us the time. We're going to start today a little bit of soccer. Well, Nathan, there was an international break across the world, so we're a little bit light on Premier League news, although there are some games today as we do record this on April 1st. And Everton will be playing a big part of the Championship season as they play Arsenal on Saturday, and they play Liverpool tomorrow in the Merseyside derby. So by the end of the weekend, you'll see me either getting a little bit grayer with Arsenal getting closer to Liverpool, or maybe a little bit more relaxed, but we'll see. But MLS has been continuing on. The LA Galaxy have certainly been struggling as the reigning MLS champions. They've not started the season really well, and it's actually the worst opening by a defending champion in league history. And they've certainly faced challenges both offensively and defensively as well. But we have seen the return of Messi coming on in MLS and coming on and being a sub in a few areas, but he's certainly embracing that little bit of super sub role right now, and they're certainly using him more as he gets older. I think we're going to see more of that throughout the course of this, potentially last season of seeing Messi in MLS. But one thing I thought was really good to see, and I think it's always good to see when you get an expansion team performing well. San Diego have been really exceeding expectations. They're currently third in the Western Conference. And again, people talk about expansion all the time, and is it necessary in that? So I think when you have an expansion team come in and they do well, I think that's only a positive, for the league as well. Switching gears a little bit to the NWSL before we get some questions on Dakota. By the way, Dakota, do you have a favorite professional team club?
Yeah. So, the NWSL, I mean, we'll get to that, but it is so fun to watch all the games. So it's on 24/7 in our household. But sadly right now, I mean, it's just really hard to be a Man City fan right now. So I am.
For you.
So it's been pretty rough, but we're still supporting.
So you do watch NWSL. What's your take on the season so far? Obviously, there's been quite a lot of news in the NWSL, both on and off the field. But what's your take at the start of the season?
Yeah. So, I mean, Orlando, always coming in at top. But it's been really amazing to watch the mix of younger players just getting pulled into the league. Obviously, with the new rulings that they're able to come into the league at any age and not have to wait till 18 is huge. So it's been just really awesome to watch that like youthful talent mix with, you have players like Marta, who is like the GOAT of women's soccer. And so it's just like really amazing to see all of them on a field all at once. And then, you've got your Trinity Rodmans who on the field, off the field, she is just like the face of women's soccer right now. And like no better person. She's like amazing, super relatable. And I think, just having coached so many girls, having them have these role models to look up to is so amazing. Back in my day was the 96 Women's World Cup team who like Mia Hamm was like everything to me. And it's so amazing to see this like new group of women athletes who were just amazing.
Yeah, it's really coming on, and obviously it's growing immensely. You've got the expansion teams in Denver; they're building a women's-only stadium. There's talk of the training facility in Oregon that's going to be shared with the WNBA, team. So it's so much getting resources and funds getting poured into it. It's awesome to see, and I think you're also seeing that growth on the field as well. I think there was obviously a portion of time where the US female players were so far ahead of the rest of the world. It pulled everybody up. It's going to be interesting to now see, can the US accelerate again with this new kind of young crop of players that are
Totally.
playing in the NWSL. And there's definitely a really kind of cool competition between NWSL, and obviously they'll have their own competition when the Super League, Women's Super League starts. It started last year, but really kind of kicks into gear. And obviously the European leagues, particularly on the English Premier League in England, also the Spanish women's league as well. So I think there's a real growth in the game. It's great to see. And so let me ask you, from dealing obviously with your girls and seeing the young kids in your club, do they follow it? Is there a talk when you get practice that the kids are watching women play, the women's game and women play? Because obviously that's something that you talked a little bit about, kind of the 99ers and that crew that came which was already the first crew where everyone was watching. Prior to that, the kids didn't really have those idols to look up to. So are they taking advantage, I guess is my question. When you're out there, are they actually following it and are they going to games? Are they watching games? Are they talking about the games and the players? What's your take?
Yeah, so I would love for Philadelphia to get a women's team. I think it would be huge for our area. The closest we can get to Gotham, but it's still kind of a bit of a travel. But it is funny. I'm super intentional when I'm doing anything like a question of the day to the kids to see who gets possession for practice. I always ask them NWSL questions to see if they're keeping up. And so, they know the common names, the Sophia Smiths, obviously when Alex Morgan was still on the field. So they know all those heavy hitter players. But I try to trick them a little bit and get them really investigating on some of these players that are up and coming. And I think social media is an amazing tool where they are seeing it all the time. Their algorithms are a lot of soccer, so they get to see a lot of the women's game on there. Maybe it's just clips, but at least they're getting that rather than nothing. So always encouraging them to watch games though.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really amazing to see where we're going, and obviously bringing in Emma Hayes on the national team. So that's really kind of added another layer of look. And I think this new crop, it's going to be tough, I think, to kind of win back that crown, but that they dominated for so long. But I think the foundation of the game in the youth side is certainly there. Hopefully we can still see that continue to grow. So
and Emma Hayes, we trust. I hope she's amazing. So I'm I feel confident.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was our soccer portion brought to you by soccer.com. One of the reasons we wanted you to be on the podcast today was we want to talk a little bit about behavior of parents in youth sports, and we felt that you not only obviously have run a large club with lots of parents, and I'm sure ask lots of questions and act in hopefully mostly positive ways, but maybe not always. But also you have been an assistant athletic director at a school, so you get a sense from what parents are like, both at school games as well in that space as well. And one of the things I did is I wrote an article, because this was something that had kind of been bothering me a little bit for a while, and we'll have the article in the link, and we'll put it out on LinkedIn as part of our Beyond the Game series. It's called the Parent Behavior at Youth Sports Events, kind of a call for change. And I took a real look at the troubling rise in poor parent behavior on the sidelines of youth sports, from aggressive yelling to even violence and violent confrontations, which is has no place in anywhere in society, never mind at a youth sports field. But having the core values of Steeler sports of teamwork, respect, integrity, commitment, we extend that to not only our coaches, not only athletes, but also to our parents. We have a module, positive parent module, that we ask all our parents to take. But looking at when I was digging into this and looking at some of the statistics, it just really kind of blew me away in where we are in the youth sports space and what we're doing as parents. I have 4 kids. I want my kids to win, of course. I want them to compete, but ultimately I want them to have fun. And at the end of the day, you're giving your child over to somebody that you have to trust that they're going to do a good job with, and you have to let them do that job. And some of those times I'll sit on the sideline. I might not, I've been coaching and working in soccer many years. My 2 boys are coached by somebody that's volunteering, that's never really coached before. They're not doing it how I would, but I let them do it. That's what they're there for. That's what they're there to do. So I wanted to see, from your perspective. First of all, let me ask you, at Steel United, Pennsylvania, how would you rate, the kind of the parents' behavior? Is it something that you think they still need to work on? You think generally it's a positive environment? And if it is, what do you think you've done to kind of help breed that culture?
Sure. So first I want to say thanks for giving me this spicy topic. No, I think, in PA, our families, I am actually really grateful for. For the most part, they are super supportive. They completely understand and buy into our core values that our coaches, lead by example. And we have the same expectations for our players, our coaches, and then it extends to family members. And so, for the most part, we definitely, keep things positive on the sidelines. But that's not to say that there is certain situations that pop up sometimes. But I think because we have so much education around like what their role is, it's clear. Parents are clear in what their role is on the sidelines. They're not there to coach. They're not there to reprimand the ref and be critics to the refs. They're there to just strictly support their kids. And I totally get emotions can run high for games. People are passionate. We love that, but you have to express it in a way that's appropriate on the sidelines and not distracting anything that's taking away from the game.
So do you think, I'm not talking specifically about Steel United Pennsylvania, but youth sports broadly, with your experience, I'm not going to age you, but you grew up in a time where social media was not as prevalent as it is.
Right.
It is now, as do you think that's had a positive or a negative impact, or how has it changed, do you think, the behavior of parents at these youth sports events, that might be different than it was, 15, 20 years ago?
Sure. You can't get away with anything these days. So, if something happens on a sideline and, immediately people are pulling out their phones and filming it. And so, you're kind of having to be on your best behavior because it will hit the internet. And then whoever you're associated with, whatever club, high school team, that essentially is a poor representation on them. And so I think, I hope that as we further into the social media world, that people start to use it as a learning tool that I have to stay in line. But I think we're still in that new age era where social media is getting bigger and bigger, that people forget or don't realize that everyone's filming every single thing.
Yeah, that's true. Everything goes up online and just never goes away. So you have in terms of there are lots of statistics out there, and I mentioned quite a few of them in the article around behavior in youth sports from parents. What do you think has kind of led us to the position where parents wanting, are they more competitive? I don't think I'm more competitive than my father, was, growing up, but he would sit on the sideline at my games. He wouldn't say a word to anybody, the coach or anybody. Is it because parents are putting so much time and resources in, so they're quicker to get frustrated if they're not getting the desired results, whether that means on the field or results with their own kid? give us a sense of what your opinion is on like why the shift. Why are we talking about parent behavior on youth sports sideline now versus 10, 15, 20 years ago when it wasn't talked about?
Yeah, it's a good question because I'm not sure if like parents today are any different than parents before. But I think because of the social media and because of the constant communication around this, there's more awareness around it. So, you pull up an Instagram reel and you see like families fighting on the sideline. Well, it causes, officials to talk about it more and how can they protect themselves and their, and the coaches and the teams, like how can we protect the game still? And so I think there's just more communication and conversation happening around it. I'm a mother of a 14-month-old, and so I'm not quite there yet with her being into soccer or sports for that matter. She'll be starting in June though, probably. But I hope, and I always try to remind myself that like when I become a parent and have that parent lens, if I can really make sure and reflect on all the tools I have as a coach. And so when she's playing, like just be there to support. My that's the biggest role, and it's a huge impact on her experience. She doesn't want to see, her family members fighting on the sidelines or anything. She wants to be there feeling supported, good or bad game. That's my perspective.
And also at Steel United and across Steel Sports, we have our positive sports parenting module that we ask all of our parents to take, and we have a huge uptick in that. But how do you think that and other things, and what other things do you do to kind of set expectations for parent conduct at the start of each season? Because I think that certainly can be a powerful tool if you let them know and communicate with them. This is the requirement. This is the what we're looking for you on the sideline. So how do you communicate that? What's that message? And how do you go about that as the team's director in Steel United?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we have a club meeting where we present a PowerPoint to families. We map out the role of the player, the role of the coach, and then the role of the parents and families on the sideline. And it's very clear. This is like, your job is not to coach, and we explain why. So maybe we're working on a low press during practice, and when we roll out to a game, we're low pressing. If you're screaming, go, 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 press, 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 the kid's going to be so confused, right, being like, wait a second, we just went through something different this week at practice. So it's just really important to just like stay in your lane on things. It's just like, we hire these amazing coaches who have ton of experience, ton of education, who do this for a living. Trust in that, trust that they are making the best decisions possible for your child and for the teams themselves. So I think that's like the number one thing. We explain the clear roles, but we explain why, because once you explain that, they're like, oh, that makes sense. Like I shouldn't be shouting like go, go, go when that's not the case. And then I think our coaches do a really good job at building connections with their families. They hold personal like meetings with their teams. So that way, any questions, coaches are able to answer those before the season starts. And then something that I think is so unique that we do at Steel is our post-game debriefs. We bring the parents in. So after games, the coach can recap the game and share their thoughts, and then the parents are there to hear it. So that way, when the kids get in the car, it's not mixed messages again. They heard the coach themselves, and now everyone's on the same page. And I think the intent versus impact is something that like I always try to keep in mind, where the intention of the parents are they want what's best for their kids and the team, right? They're not trying to do anything maliciously, but the impact that it has if they are misbehaving on the sidelines is actually the opposite of what they would want in the experience for their kid and their teammates. So I think that's really important also to kind of note.
That's awesome, yeah.
When you are working with your staff, your coaches, what sort of support do you give them, training, advice, as far as maybe not only setting themselves up for success when it comes to their families and the parents, but also too if they have to deal with anything negative that may come up during the season?
Absolutely. I think Jonesy does a really great job at offering a ton of support for coaches, whether you're having an issue with a player or a parent. He offers a ton of support there and kind of like guidelines that we want to follow and protocols that we follow at Steel. But me personally, like in the region, I refer and use those guidelines, but then it's also my job to support our coaches. So if they have an issue, they know they can text me, call me right away, and we can talk through some things. Making sure that we covered everything that we need to cover on our end and procedurally, but then also the people piece, right? Like they're still children and they're still parents and humans, right? So it's really important, to understand that sometimes there's a heat of the moment and we're all humans and we have those emotions, but it's really important for us, if there is something that happens, we address it, we share with them, hey, remember, this is our policy, these are your roles. And if it continues to happen, obviously it comes down further to me. But it also just to follow up on the parent modules. So if somebody isn't following suit, maybe, hey, here's a little bit of training for you on the sidelines if you're not, crystal clear on what our expectations are.
Just curious. I mean, if you could just maybe implement one rule or one piece of rule just for parents, not just in your club, but maybe just overall in soccer or sports in general, what do you think it would be?
Okay, so I'm actually going to steal this from Abby Wambach, who, for those of you who don't know, is the GOAT of women's soccer in America. So she had a really awesome segment, I believe it was on her podcast, talking about how, parent behavior is a big topic right now. And, someone asked her, like, how do you go to these soccer games and not want to coach and you're just a parent? Like, how do you do that? And she goes, because I'm not there to coach. Like, I'm there as soon as my kids come off the field. The first thing I say is, I had so much fun watching you play today. And she said the reaction from the children is the most amazing thing, because usually kids think if they come off of a field, it's going to be criticism. It's going to be, whatever it is. And it's always tied to performance, where she said that her first thing is, I had so much fun watching you play. Like, did you have fun? How do you think it went? So asking the kids the questions where you share the power and give it back to them, because essentially it's their experience. And it's important that you hear them. I can speak personally, love my parents so much. And I know there was so many factors and pressure situations to get me to where, I had to go for soccer. So it is a different perspective when I hear that, and how refreshing that is compared to, you didn't put that ball away, or, you should have scored X amount of goals. Like, that is a very different vibe coming off the field, which I think is gonna just help kids enjoy the sport more and play longer.
Yeah. I still grapple with finding the right time to talk to my daughter about things to work on. And I definitely talk about the positives first, and tell her how proud I am of her, and how she did. But at the same time, as a parent, you want to help them grow, and
Of course.
give them as much feedback as you can. And I think just recognizing, it's important to just give them a little bit of space to digest the game. And they're smart, right? Yeah, kids are super smart. They know what they need to work on. And if they you want them, I think, to really have that drive to get better, and come to you sometimes for that advice. But
absolutely,
it's something, I mean, I think parents, we all grapple with it.
Yeah. It's a balance, right? And again, like, I'm not there yet, but I know it's near future that I'm going to be, I'm probably going to come to you guys and say, help me out here. Like, what do I do?
Well, I really appreciate you having you on, Dakota. One more question for you before we kind of go to our start of the show. And there's so much, as you said, so much more awareness now about youth sports behavior. You've got pros talking, about it. You mentioned Abby Wambach and others. And if we can do the right things, if as an industry, youth sports can really promote that positive parent sports culture, what do you think youth sports can look like in 5-10 years? How do you think it would change? Do you think that could be, there's an argument that, maybe it becomes less competitive because parents aren't like getting their kids into those elite, alphabet soup leagues in soccer, or, traveling all over the country baseball, because they're now maybe they're listening to their kids a little bit more and they want to have fun. Do we lose that? Or do you think, it can accelerate that player development?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And like it almost would create like a utopia for, players wanting to just play a sport where they do compete, right? Like, so the competition piece doesn't necessarily have to leave or won't leave. I think kids will really start finding themselves in youth sports when their voice is the loudest one. So I think it's like really important to note that just because the behavior gets a little better on the sidelines, the competition can get better or not change. It could still be competitive as it is. I don't see there being like a lack of competition. But I think also, speaking for the officials, we have a shortage of officials because nobody wants to do the job because it's so horrible. Like they are treated so horribly. And I think, we got to give it up to them for those who are keeping our kids safe and, managing the games with us. I think it's really important to treat them with respect. And that way we can continue to get more officials with, strong credibility at these games, because it's just not a good atmosphere for them. And I think if we can change that, it's only going to better the sport.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Well, thank you for your time today. We really appreciate. Nathan, you wanted to ask one more question? We can go.
I do have one more, and
I did say one more, but I was obviously.
No, I mean, a lot of times when we talk about parent behavior, it has kind of a negative connotation, right? But I know it's such a small fraction of the parents that are with their kids in youth sports. So I want to recognize the positive that comes from parents. So just if you could, some of the things that you've seen in Pennsylvania, or
yeah,
just, any of your other, I know you've been in the high school space and
Sure.
you've done so much. So just anything you've seen on the parent side, just from a positive standpoint that really sticks out to you.
I love that you bring this up, because we couldn't do it without the parents. Whether it's the atmosphere and the culture, or even just bringing their kids to things, it's so important to have their support. I will shout out our PA families. It was such a cool experience for a bunch of our teams to go to the St. Pat's Cup in New Jersey a few weekends ago, and have a whole group of Steel teams from all different regions there. We've got parents wearing pink wigs, and, they're wearing pink everything. And, that is the support that I love to see. And, it also takes a little bit of the anxiety out of the games when kids see their families being a little silly, or being super supportive in that way. It does something to the kids and their perspective, where it's not so serious that they're stressing themselves out before games. So I definitely love that you brought that up, because, families are a huge part of how this runs. And, I appreciate all that ours do.
I love it. Thank you so much, Dakota, for joining us. Been great to have you, and you've been such an asset to Steel United and to Steel Sports. So thanks for all you do.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for having me on.
Martin, I think we got a stat of the show.
Yeah, I've actually got two numbers for you today, Nathan. As it's the last episode of our season 2 here, I've got two numbers for you. So the first one is 23. They're not great stats, following up on our conversation about youth sports behavior on the sidelines, particularly from parents. So first stat is 23. 23 states have enacted laws specifically addressing assaults on sports officials, with varying degrees of severity. And my question obviously would be, why do we need 23 states to enact that law? So that's certainly one to look at. And then the other one, kind of tying on to that, is 55%. 55% of coaches have experienced parents yelling negatively at officials or their own children, and 2 in 5 have witnessed parents yelling negatively at other children. So there's certainly things that we can do to improve that, and hopefully building awareness around this topic, and hopefully it's not taboo for people to discuss it and create a positive sports culture and environment for kids to play and have fun, because we know that they stay in sports when they have fun for a long period of time. So that is our final stat of the show for this season. So Nathan, I'll turn to you to wrap us up.
Yeah, it's been a great second season. We've had a lot of great guests, and I know we're going to have a lot more great guests, great topics in the future. Like you said, this was the final show of this season. We'll be back starting at the beginning of May for season 3 and another series of podcast episodes for the Steel Sports Show, the U Sports Podcast. It's been a pleasure, Martin. We've had fun. Looking forward to rebooting this here in a few weeks.
But we will see you in a few weeks. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you.